Hello, and welcome to reCapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at reCapping Podcast.
Also, rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We want to hear your thoughts on the movies and shows we review.
Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel, and we will read them during the show.
Or reach out to us on social media. We love talking all things entertainment and pop culture with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you. Oh, Ashley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Oh, I'm so excited. We have our very first author on the pod.
It's amazing that we've been doing this for 5 years and there are still firsts. That makes me so excited. And particularly a first-time author who wowed me with the story that she told.
When I tell you I'm minding my business reading this book and then something happens and I was like, what the F?
Yep. I was like, listening audiobook and audibly in my bathroom like, wait, what just happened? I'm in the shower. Listen. Do I have to get out of the shower and rewind this?
Yes.
What?
Yes, you do. I am talking about the wonderful, the fabulous, the talented Kristen L. Berry. Welcome to reCapping with Delora and Ashley.
I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so honored to be your first author interview. That is so exciting.
Oh, I've been just literally giddy. And it's to the point where I'm like, should I tell people? I don't want to jinx it. So we're here now. So I'm so excited. Oh, so this is our In Conversation. So we love to get to know a little bit about you and your wonderful debut novel, We Don't Talk About Carol. Please walk us through the highlights of your career journey thus far as a former Southfield Lathrop Charger from the suburb of Michigan to a traditionally published debut author living in Cali.
Yes. You know what is so funny also? My literary agent also grew up in Southfield. She lives in New York.
Door. I love that. What high school did she go to?
So I'm not exactly sure because she spent the first 6 years of her life in Southfield, and then she lived in like Troy and Royal Oak and maybe somewhere else in between. So I'm not sure like where she actually finished high school, but we definitely bonded during our initial call over the fact that we're both Michiganders.
I love that.
Which is so funny. I
and it peeked through in your novel too, which I loved. But yes.
I couldn't help it. I had to have a little Detroit cameo in the book, and also try to show Detroit in a light that I don't feel enough pop culture portrays the city that I love.
Yes,
that was also important to me.
Yes. Love Radio does a good job. Have you read that one?
Oh no, writing
it is
notes.
A young adult novel. It's romance.
Love that.
Yeah, it's by Ebony Liddell. Yeah, I read it. It was lovely, and I thought she did a really great job repping Detroit.
Oh, I love that
literature.
Well, I have to read it. So my upbringing in Michigan definitely helped prepare me in a lot of ways for eventually writing a novel. Partially, we had so many wonderful teachers in the Southfield public school system. I think I actually shouted out Mrs. Hayes from Southfield Lathrop in my acknowledgments because that her AP English classes were so meaningful to me and really helped shape me as a reader and a thinker about books, which was so important in eventually writing books of my own. So
I love that.
Detroit, that my upbringing is really important to me for that reason. And then I went to the University of Michigan where I studied English, language and literature, which was so fun. Just spending 4 years reading books, talking about books, writing about books. Like it was a wonderful experience. And so I always imagined that I would become a novelist at some point, but I also am a very pragmatic person and knew that I would need to, pay the bills. And it's not very practical to just come out of college, write a novel, and then be able to live on your books. So then I originally was going to go into print journalism. That's what all my internships were in, working at newspapers. And then I decided that, you know what, I'm a writer. I am not a journalist. Those are two different things, which then led me to pivot into PR, which is what I've done for the past 20 years while writing in my spare time.
Wow. PR. How was that transition going from, you said literary degree from U of M to
Mhm.
PR? Like, I guess I think marketing, PR, things along those lines. Of course, Olivia Pope also comes to mind too, but she's also a fixer. But, you know, could
Crisis
you help
PR.
me? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
crisis. Most of the work that I do, thank goodness, is not that intense most of the time. But honestly, so my internships were working at newspapers, and I really did think about that quite a bit when writing We Don't Talk About Carol as well, because the main character is a former crime reporter. A lot of the
Yes.
journalism that I did was on the crime beat. And Sydney remarks, my main character from the book remarks at one point that she hated the part of journalism where you have to you know, pry open people's, painful emotional wounds in order to report on a story. And that's honestly why I had to stop. Because it was really
Mm.
difficult coming to people often in the most challenging moments of their lives and asking them for information to, yes, inform the public, but also to sell newspapers, which just I had a really hard time with. And so at the end of the day, PR is still all about telling stories and telling
Mm.
stories through journalists
I love
generally. And
that.
so it was a really kind of seamless transition actually to market the skills I gained from journalism into a PR career.
Wonderful. So you did already answer one of the questions I have. I'm like, did you always know that you were a writer? Is that something you grew
Mm.
into? But I like to expound, like, what type of writer did you envision yourself being? And are you living that dream?
Oh my gosh, yes, which is so wild. I feel like I'm still constantly having to pinch myself that this is all actually happening. But yes, I definitely thought I imagined myself being a writer for as long as I've lived. I can't remember a time before wanting to be a writer. I have distinct memories of going to the Southfield Public Library and to the bookstores in our hometown and finding where my name would be on the bookshelves. So being able to do that for real now
Manifesting,
is, yeah,
understanding.
manifesting before I knew manifesting was a thing.
I called it
And
visualization growing up.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I kind of like the rebrand that it's had. But yeah, I definitely visualize myself as an author. And then the type of author, I mean, I sort of that has depended on the books that I was reading the most at the time. So I've started a lot of different novels over the years. Sometimes they would be, family dramas. Sometimes they would be thrillers. Sometimes they would be coming of age stories. So I think it's been, I always knew that I wanted to be a novelist. The exact type of novel has kind of varied depending on the types of stories that were really capturing my attention at the time.
I love that. I was gonna make a joke, and it's such a geeky joke, but it's like apparently Danielle Steele like writes constantly. And like when I asked you like what type of author do you envision, I'm like, probably not that. They said her output is ridiculous. I read that recently in that
She's very
community.
prolific, so I'm not
Yes.
surprised.
All right. For our listeners who have not read it yet, how would you describe We Don't Talk About Carol, what it's about, and what inspired it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in We Don't Talk About Carol, my main character, Sydney, is clearing out the home of her grandmother who recently passed when she learns that she had an aunt named Carol, who was one of six Black girls to go missing from the same Raleigh, North Carolina neighborhood back in the 1960s. None of the girls have been found, and for several decades, no one in Sydney's family has even mentioned Carol's name. Now, as I mentioned, Sydney's a former crime reporter, so in a lot of ways, she's the perfect person to investigate what happened to Carol and the missing girls, except that she left journalism several years ago after an obsession with the case of another missing girl caused her to experience a psychotic break. But Sydney can't help herself from trying to unravel this mystery, but in doing so, in addition to putting a lot of strain on her marriage, she also winds up exhuming her own troubled past, which forces her to question everything: her fixation on the missing girls, her future as a mother, and everyone she's come to trust. So I think We Don't Talk About Carol is part suspense and part family drama, But I also believe that it's a thrilling, poignant, and ultimately hopeful reminder that in order to truly embrace our future, we first must be willing to reconcile with our past.
I could definitely see that.
Hmm. I'm going to assume that's
So,
not the
yeah.
first time you've had to talk about this. That was so poignant.
Perfection. I was like, I need to talk about
Thank
my
you.
podcast this concisely.
Exactly. We need to perfect our elevator pitch a little bit more.
This is where the
That,
PR background comes in handy, you
There you
know?
go. There you go.
She's got her talking points. And in terms of what inspired the story, I started writing this novel in May of 2020. I was taking a lot of socially distanced walks around my neighborhood at the time, listening to true crime podcasts. And it was in listening to those podcasts that I learned about the really disturbing discrepancies when it comes to the cases of missing people of color in this country. For
Yeah.
example, Black Americans are going missing at disproportionately high rates, yet our stories are less likely to be covered by the press and they're less likely to be solved. So I've always thought of fiction as a great way for building empathy and awareness for, the experiences and challenges of others. And so I wanted to try and find a way of maybe shedding light on this issue through an entertaining and propulsive novel.
That's a perfect segue into my question, which was the fact that this plot obviously centers around missing Black girls. It made me kind of reminisce about the series Truth Be Told on Apple TV Plus, where
Yep.
Octavia Spencer was a journalist and had a podcast and kind of dove into those stories quite a bit. So my thought and question really is, what research did you do? What went into your writing to inform the story and the characters?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of film and TV, there's an excellent documentary, I believe it's from HBO, on the Black and Missing Foundation, which is a real organization that I call out in the acknowledgments of the novel, because their goal is to provide additional awareness and to amplify the stories of the missing people of color whose stories are not being covered in the media and getting the attention from law enforcement that they should. They also provide a lot of support to the families of the loved ones of the missing, which is super important. So that documentary was really helpful. They also have some really important statistics on their website, as well about these cases. I dove into the FBI data around missing people, and you can see they report on this every year, how many people were reported missing in the country, and then they divvy up those numbers by race, gender, and other demographics, and so it's pretty black and white. How the disparities when it comes to just how many of us are going missing. There's also some really excellent reporting from outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times around this issue. So, I think it's good that there's some additional awareness being given to this issue. I'm really disheartened that there's still the need for such reporting, but those pieces definitely informed my research quite a bit. And then I did some research as well, just in terms of how this missing people of color and missing people in general were treated back in the 1960s. There's been a lot of changes in the way law enforcement and communities treat missing people. And so it was interesting also to kind of look into those differences and weave them into the book as well. I think, especially depending on your community, it's not always the first reaction to report missing people to the police for a variety of reasons. I mean, obviously, if you're a community that has a fraught relationship with law enforcement, that's one very big reason why people might not be your first inclination. Also, if you think the person who's missing, if you have reason to believe that they went on their own, of their own accord, that's also another deterrent sometimes. So I was really interested in trying to weave all of those different pieces into this book.
I want to dive a little bit more into the story.
Sure.
There were some big twists and turns, as Delora and I kind of talked about at the top of the episode, and some that, significantly changes our perception of the characters, particularly Carol. Was the goal to paint anyone as a hero or a villain, or were you just trying to tell a human story and let the audience decide?
Oh, yeah, I love that question. And of course, I will give no spoilers. It's a spoiler-free answer. But I received the feedback in a creative writing class years ago, from a professor that there are few true villains and few true heroes in life. And so it's also important to think about when you're creating fictional characters. I personally also think that the most interesting characters are, they're somewhere in the gray area. I think it's also because to your point of like, was I trying to create a human story? I was, and I think part of being human is that sort of, that complication between, maybe doing what you think is the right thing. Sometimes it's not that easy. It's not such an easy choice, like what is right or
Yeah,
wrong in certain
situational.
instances.
Yep.
Yes, understood.
Exactly. So yeah, I think the most interesting, as I mentioned, characters are the complicated ones. So that's what I wanted to really feature in this book.
I was just going to say, I think it's been more and more the case with the content that at least I consume, where even people who were once thought of as villains have a redemption arc and have things that a backstory that comes up
The
about them where you're
backstory that
like,
makes
oh,
sense.
well,
Yeah.
now that helps to better explain their behavior and these different things. So, to your point about never really having a true villain or a true hero, it's really everybody kind of lives in the shades of gray. I particularly enjoy the stories when women get to be more complex and women get to be
Yes.
more layered, because I think for a long time, female characters had to have a different level of perfection and couldn't be messy, couldn't be ugly, couldn't be flawed.
And we all know that's not real life. So
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
many
I
think
Yeah.
they're the
completely agree.
instigators of some,
Yeah.
I
but
completely agree.
and to what Ashley was saying, I was just about to say there's a lot of morally gray. That's what's happening in fiction as of late, but just a lot of gray characters. I just was thinking in particular, I got a chance to connect with you over social media over our love for Black Cake, the series. I know you've
Yes.
read the book and you watched the series, and I asked you what your thoughts were. And like I'm thinking about the young woman's father and how he
Hmm.
essentially, she was paying a debt. You know what I mean? And we got a chance
Yeah.
to know his backstory, and it's just like this doesn't save him for me. like,
No,
like
no.
I get why he is the way he is. However, there was no growth, there was no remorse or accountability. So it's a wrap for me, you know?
Diabolical.
Heartbreaking.
I mean, it's interesting, very heartbreaking. I think it's interesting, I think villains rarely think of themselves as villains. Generally, they think that they are, in the right in terms of what they're doing. They think they have a good reason for what they're doing. And so, whether we as readers or consumers of the content agree with them and their behavior, I think it does make it more interesting when we at least know kind of what prompted their
Yeah.
behavior. It adds like more depth to the story, and it's more relatable because we all know people who do things that we don't agree with,
Yeah.
but maybe we understand at least where their head was at.
I think that's the fun though. That's why we have a podcast. We get to talk about and debate, and
Yes.
Yes.
it wouldn't be any fun if everybody was good. Anyway.
Again, without spoilers. So Ashley and I started doing this thing recently where we identify our MVP of a story, TV, movie, what have you. And this is the character that, stuck out to you. They could be very well the main character or very, interesting side character. But who is your MVP character in your novel and why?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, in a lot of ways, my initial knee-jerk reaction was Sydney, my main character, but I actually think that Sasha, her younger sister, was such an important addition to the story. She's sort of like, they have a complicated relationship. They're very different people. They have a lot of, unspoken grievances that, have to eventually be addressed, but haven't for some time. And I think that Sasha was sort of Sydney's perfect foil in the story. And then, they wind up kind of collaborating to try to solve the mystery. And I think that, Sasha brought like a lightness to the story, but also a different perspective of the childhood that they both had, but had different perceptions of. And so, yeah, when I originally started writing Sasha's character, it was just sort of maybe a challenge in Sydney's life. And as I continued writing the story, she just became such a more integral part of the story itself, which was a lot of fun to write. And also, a lot of people reach out and tell me that Sasha's their favorite character.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm glad that you did what you did with Sasha, because it's always interesting when talking about sibling dynamics where it's like, we literally lived under the same roof. How are we so different, And I love that there were several situations that happened that your lead character saw. And then as an audience member, you're like, this is what happened. She is our narrator, right? We're seeing it through her POV. And then Sasha's like, well, no, this happened. Or, she added more context to the situation. And it really just left you sitting there like, sometimes you just don't see the whole picture.
Absolutely. Or you see it in two different ways, even if you experience the exact same moment. And I think that that's so true to a lot of our experiences. And, I did really want to incorporate a complicated family story in this novel, because I think a lot of us have, varying experiences with our own family members. But I think the sibling dynamic, and maybe in particular with sisters, is so fraught because I think there's also a lot of pressure and expectation that you and your sister are going to be best friends for life. And, you are two completely different people. You just because you were born in the same family and were raised in the same home potentially doesn't mean that you have anything in common or that you would necessarily gravitate to each other if you weren't related by blood. And so I think it can also be interesting as adult siblings to kind of figure out what does your relationship look like when you're no longer forced to be together. And then also sometimes we have some unspoken hurts and resentments from childhood. We can also often tend to hold on to old roles. I'm an older
Oh
sister,
my
and
gosh.
sometimes
Yes.
I definitely still
I have a younger sister, so yes, I understand completely what you're saying. I know for my sister and I, we can also blow up very quickly and cool down very quickly. I'm like, this is unreal. Like, how is this possible? Like, and I'm like, okay, but I love you.
Well, I was going to use a pop culture reference and say, look at people's reactions to Tia and Tamara and the possibility that they're not that close anymore,
They're
but they're
twins.
twins and they did everything together and they were a part of our childhoods and they're so cute and da da da. Like, how is that possible? But even twins need to forge their own identity and figure out who they are. And they're at two different points in their lives. So, because even we, like me and Delora, we had reactions to their
Of
relationship
course,
at
everyone
the
did.
time.
Yeah, and I'm their third twin.
Same
That's a
birthday.
run, that's a running joke I've always had. When I was young, when I figured out their birthday was the same, I was like, yeah, I'm their third twin. Yes, I should just say triplet, but and they're much older than me, but still, I loved it.
It's so good.
So, Kristen, you talked a little bit about Sydney and Sasha. Which character in the book, though, of any, do you identify most with personally and why?
Sydney and I are very similar in a lot of ways, some superficial ones and some not so superficial. So Sydney and I are both Black women. We were both in our late 30s when the book began. We both work in PR, living in LA. So a lot of those pieces were similar. And I did draw a lot. I mean, this is very much a work of fiction, but I did draw in some aspects of my background in writing the story, you know, having family from North Carolina, those pieces, the Detroit connection. I try to weave some of those aspects into this story. Another plot point in this book is the motherhood storyline. So Sydney and her husband are on their third IVF attempt at the beginning of the book, yet Sydney is still kind of unsure how she feels about becoming a mother. She has some complicated feelings around that. And this topic was top of mind for me just because, like, as I said, I was in my late 30s when I started writing the novel. And if you are a woman with a uterus at that age, literally everyone is asking you about your plans, about having children, whether it's your doctor or your friends or people you barely know on social media. And so I thought about how difficult it might be to think through those questions if you're especially someone with Sydney's complicated childhood, because it's very common for people with traumatic upbringings to maybe wrestle with whether to become parents themselves for a variety of reasons. And I really thought it would be kind of important and interesting to explore that topic in the book.
We are a TV and film podcast, so we have to ask this question. Do you have a dream cast in mind to bring your story to the screen?
So funny. There's certain characters who I definitely cast before I started writing the book. That's who I imagined as I was writing their characters. So Malik, who is Sydney's husband, has always been Jay Ellis.
Okay.
That's been
I can see that.
Got it.
Does that feel
very
calm?
It is. It makes a lot of sense.
I'm right there with you. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that he'd be perfect for that. I've always thought about Angela Bassett as Sydney's mom.
Okay.
Ooh, strong Black woman.
She also would have the reserved, stoic,
stern
nature that character needs.
Exactly.
But she could crack elements of warmth when needed.
Yes, exactly right. And then Sasha was tough because in my head she was always Lauren London, but from when she was in ATL. So years ago. Yeah, when she was new.
We all know.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that new. Exactly. Like that was with the dimples and everything. That was Sasha in my mind. Sydney, I don't know. Sydney, I think, needs to be like a fresh new discovery. I could not think of a perfect Sydney.
Did you picture your face?
Kind of, unfortunately. I did kind of superimpose myself onto her.
But I couldn't. Unfortunate. What they always say, the saying is, it's like if someone hasn't written a book that you want to read, you write it, right? So you're centered yourself.
That's a Toni Morrison quote.
Yes. Yes. So I love it.
But if you have any suggestions for proper casting for Sydney, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I was sitting thinking, like, who, as I was reading it, did I personally have in mind? Now my thoughts are going with your characters that you've mentioned. I think for Malik's character, I pictured definitely a brown-skinned Black man, but I don't know if it was Jay Ellis build or more so like Malik Yoba type vibe.
Ooh.
You know what I mean? Like that was more of the look and feel I have for that character.
I like that.
Yeah. For Sasha, did I have anybody really in mind for Sasha that gives me like little sister energy all the time? Maybe like a Kiki Palmer, somebody like that.
Say, for Sydney, I'm thinking Journey or Journey Smollett.
I can see Journey Smollett for sure.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
I feel like there's someone else. I'm still thinking.
But see,
we also need more options.
Zendaya could be, but
I don't want
age a little bit.
Yeah, Zendaya doesn't fit in this at all for me. Unless she's a flashback character. Maybe she's a flashback character from the 60s.
Yeah, there you go.
I can see her in that aesthetic. And yeah, first of all, we stand Zendaya on this podcast.
Absolutely.
It's not that.
100%,
it's the story. Right. It's the story and how I imagine these Black people. That's all.
Agreed.
That's all.
And I do have a wild card, Andra Day as Sydney, maybe. That's a wild card, though.
I mean, but she's a fantastic
Ooh,
actress.
She is.
yeah.
She's a fantastic actress. I could see her more with Malik Yoba than I could see who'd you name first?
Journey.
Yeah, then I could see Journey
Mm,
necessarily. Like I feel like if it's
mm.
Journey, I need to recast her husband, you know?
That's fair. I mean, that is
Yeah.
important, like kind of seeing how they play off of each other.
But this is the fun though. We'll have to do like your picks and then we'll have to solidify our picks and put that like in the show notes of this cast because we're manifesting this cast for you.
Yes,
Oh, it's
we are.
happening.
Yes,
Yeah.
Because
please. Let's
one
make
thing
it
that
happen.
I loved about your novel is that with the dual timelines, it was so immersive. Like I definitely pictured it in my mind, like, oh, I can see that the old timey car driving down a dusty road in the South. Like I was there, you know what I mean? So
Oh, I'm so glad.
Oh, one more really quick. If it was Andra Day or Journey, the younger sister is Yara Shahidi. That's my
Easy,
I
Sasha.
did think about her. I did
easy.
think about
Yep,
I
her.
can see
That's so
that.
true.
that's
That's
my
a good
Sasha.
call. I like that.
Oh, that
I also love
excites
her.
me. Yeah. Oh,
I know.
absolutely.
Yeah, we love her too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's been the most rewarding part of becoming an author so far?
Definitely receiving messages from people I do not know about how much they love this book. Because it's just really nice to hear. I did put my heart and soul into this book. But also, I mean, we're living in such a weird, often
It's
dark
the upside down.
time. It is. It really is. But it's just it restores my faith in humanity that
Oh,
people, take time out of their busy lives to reach out to a perfect stranger, like find me on Instagram or dig up my email address and to take the time to write me a note about how much they love the story or how much it meant to them. That has been, it's still every time I receive one, I get a little emotional because it's just so lovely.
I love that. I talked already about feeling, some parallels with Truth Be Told, the series on Apple TV Plus. While
Mhm.
reading the book, I was also thinking about some comparisons to the 2003 film Gothica with Halle Berry.
Yes, which I've seen, but I don't really remember the plot of.
So in that film, Halle Berry is possessed by the spirit of a woman who was murdered. And it comes down to her basically trying to help Halle Berry uncover the truth about the people who are committing these series of crimes. And Halle Berry ends up having a very personal connection to these crimes. And so I won't
Mm.
give too much away because again, we're not doing a spoiler version of this, but it definitely gave me a lot of vibes when I was reading it or listening to it. So what other sources came to mind for you like as you were writing any inspo from anything that's kind of like pre-existing or that you're like, this story makes sense outside of the title, which, we don't talk about Bruno, obviously.
I've
You get
also
Is
that a
heard
one that
lot.
people are
Do you
gonna
get that a
see.
lot? I'm curious.
Yeah.
I do people sing the theme song at me a lot. I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. As far as my inspiration, there were a couple of books that I was thinking about a lot while I was writing this. One, so I really wanted to, blend my two favorite genres to read into this book, suspense and family drama. And I was, at the very beginning of writing this novel when The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett was published. I don't know if either of you have read it.
I have
Oh,
not.
please, you will love it. The
I've
Vanishing
heard of
Half
it.
is
Okay.
so good.
Let me use one of my Audible credits now.
Get it. You will
Like my
not regret
Goodreads
it.
account.
You will not regret it. So in The Vanishing Half is also a story about two sisters with a difficult relationship. Um, and it deals a lot with the topic of racial passing back, I think,
Ooh.
in the 50s.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting. And she did an incredible job of having this sort of complicated family drama, a bit of a mystery. And so it's really emotionally rich, but it's also a page turner. You're like,
Mm.
what happens next? And she also just has these really beautiful and vivid portrayals of complicated Black women, which, as we talked about, we love to see that. So I was really
Hmm.
thinking about that as I was writing this book. And then when it comes to suspense, I always think about Gone Girl by Gillian
Mm-hmm.
Flynn because
That was a
my
moment, a
goodness,
cultural
Yeah.
moment.
it was a
Yeah.
We
cultural moment.
we read the
Yes.
book and when the movie came out, that was yes.
Yeah.
Also, an incredible adaptation.
Took the
Yes.
They
words out of
nailed
my mouth.
it.
That is
Yeah.
so true because so many of these films and TV shows fall short.
Don't.
Mm-hmm.
It
Exactly.
was just as
They nailed
satisfying.
it.
They
Yes.
did.
Just as sad, even if you read the book already. And so I
Yeah.
thought about that a lot because the book was so satisfying. You want to have, if there's going to be a twist in your book, you want it to feel, you want it to surprise you, but you also want it to feel inevitable.
Yeah.
Like, you want it to feel earned. And a lot of times you read a book and like you're like, wait, what? Where did that come from? And then you get irritated. And so I really kept thinking that's like to me the gold standard for suspense and thrillers is Gone Girl. So I thought about that quite a bit
Man,
too.
shout out to Rosamund Pike. That is a chilling white woman.
Whew,
Chilling.
chilling.
She
Capital
hasn't been able to
C.
shake that archetype. You know what I mean?
No,
Like I
because
feel
I
like
care a
she's
lot. I
Yeah,
couldn't even
also
finish that film. I had to fast forward through because I was so upset.
understandable.
But
oh,
that's great. I agree with you too about the payoff, like having that level of
yes.
satisfaction of like, this made so much sense. This was such a good wrap up. Like it didn't leave you lingering or anything unresolved, which is a great point because some fiction does try to like, oh, I wanted to leave people, I wanted to leave it up to their, interpretation. I don't need that. Let's go ahead and
No
wrap
one
this
wants
up.
a Sopranos ending. No
Yeah.
one wants a Sopranos ending.
Nobody
Okay.
wants a fade to black. That is so true. That's so
No.
true. One of our favorite writers, Shonda Rhimes, the
Ooh,
great Shonda
yes.
Rhimes.
Queen Shonda.
She always encouraged writers to write every single day, no excuses. What's something unique or non traditional about your writing process?
Yes. So I think the funny thing about me is I'm a pretty type A person in general. Like I'm very structured, I'm very disciplined. But for some reason when it comes to writing, I generally don't subscribe to that write every day rule. For a few reasons. I think for most of us, we're not able to do it as our full-time job. I still work full-time in PR, for example. You don't all with all the other obligations and commitments of life, you just don't necessarily always have time to sit at your computer and write personally. And sometimes too, I just need a day off to let my mind, breathe,
Literally
fill my cup by watching things and reading things and just
living
existing in the
life.
world, living
Yeah.
life.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, don't
So,
not to interrupt you, don't they always say
yeah.
too, writers have to live and have experiences because
Yes,
otherwise you won't have
Yes.
anything to write about.
exactly.
Absolutely. That's why the first novel I wrote before this one was terrible. I was just out of college. I was a baby. I didn't know anything. It's like, what am I writing a book about? So, I guess also there's a lot of advice out there about there being a certain way of writing a book and, certain processes you have to have. And honestly, I think it's all about finding what works for you and what works for you for whatever project you're working on. So for like we don't talk about Carol, I did not have an outline when I wrote that book. I didn't have a word
Hmm.
count goal. I really was just
Wow.
trying to like see what would be the most interesting thing to happen next. And then I gave chapters to my writing group once a month for them to review and critique and give me feedback on. Now that I'm in a contract with the Penguin Random House, I've had to be a little bit more structured to make my deadline. So I'm looking at my little post-it now. To make my deadline, I had to write 545 words a day or 3,800 words per week. But that 3,800 words per week was important to me because it's not about sitting at my computer every day. I could do a longer session maybe on the weekends or things like that, just so that I could have some flexibility. So a lot of people say like butts in chairs, you have to write every day. I don't necessarily think that that's a reasonable thing to put on yourself for most people who can't do it full
So,
time.
what gets your creativity juices going? And I say that because, again, I always quote Quincy Jones because his documentary on Netflix is one of my top documentaries of all time. And he talks about how traveling it helps
Mhm.
his, creativity. So like we just did our Dreamcast. Do you have actors or pictures of people like a Pinterest board or something?
Yeah, I mean, so usually when I start a project, I create like a little, so corporate of me to create like a Google sheet, Google presentation or whatever, and kind of pick out pictures of who I think the person looks like. I don't necessarily cast them from actors. Sometimes they're just, influencers or people I know, people I'm aware of. So just to give myself a visual reference. But yeah, traveling, existing in the world, going to a coffee shop and just sort of like hearing what people are talking about, seeing what people are wearing, like picking up on unusual dynamics between a couple at the table next to me. I think observing the world is, it's a rich source of inspiration. Um, and then too, just like I like writing very early in the morning, even when I don't have to. I like that time, like the sun isn't even quite up yet. It's just me, my coffee, and my imagination, and I don't feel like I'm being, forced to work to meet somebody else's expectations. I could just brainstorm what would be most interesting to me to happen.
Yeah.
That's also where I find my creativity. It's just me and my little weird thoughts when I'm not quite awake yet.
Mornings and nights are sacred as an adult.
They
They
are.
are
This
They
is so
really are.
true.
sacred for
Yeah.
routine and for being able to have no demands on you, whether that's family, jobs, whatever. Like you have to carve out that time for yourself as an adult for sure.
Exactly. It's important.
What was it like to physically hold your book for the first time and to see it shelved among authors you admire?
So surreal. So surreal. It's funny because I think this is like you've probably noticed this if you follow a lot of authors on Instagram, the unboxing when they finally get their physical
Yes.
copies. But it's so funny because like you don't, it's like, it's not Christmas because with Christmas, you know the date. You don't know when it's coming. It just sort
Hmm.
Oh.
of, the box just sort of appears. And so it's like this wonderful surprise of opening it and holding it. And even though you've like reviewed the proofs, in PDF form a billion times, it does not compare to holding the actual physical copy
I
in
have
your
a physical
hands.
copy here. My daughter and I went to Barnes and Nobles. I was like, Mommy is picking up a special book today. And it was just so cute. And I was like looking around. I'm like, I found it. It was right in the front, Barnes and Nobles. I didn't have to go digging in the back, you know what I mean? And I have my copy.
That's so special too, because there are no guarantees at every bookstore. Like most authors, unless you're, a massive, Taylor Jenkins Reid name,
Yeah.
most authors will not have their books in every single bookstore. And so, like, I went to some bookstores and I was on a trip to New Orleans recently and I couldn't find it on any shelves, and I was like, oh no, maybe it's because they're all sold out. Let's just go with that.
There you
But
go.
Yes.
it
There you
is
Yes.
go.
when
Yes. Flip
There
that
you go.
around.
let's just flip it
Yes.
around. I think that's probably what happened. But
Yep.
when I do go to a bookstore and I see it on the shelf, I mean, thankfully, the first time that I did see it in my local neighborhood bookstore, I asked my husband to capture it. It was the day the book came out, and so that was just such a special moment. I'll never forget the moment of walking in and seeing my book in my
I do
favorite
have
bookstore.
another follow-up question concerning your
Yeah.
book.
Yes.
Are blue hydrangeas a favorite flower of yours?
The funny thing is, no, not at all. But for some reason,
I had to
I
ask.
yeah, no, fair question because it's and I suggested this cover essentially when it was time to do the design, which was really cool that they actually took that idea and ran with it. No, but I think that again because I started writing this book during the early days of the pandemic. I don't know, I got really into like plants. And I
So did
downloaded an
everybody.
app to identify
Yes,
what
I
they are.
We are all plant
absolutely.
mothers, okay? So
Absolutely.
yes.
When I
I
tell you,
got a new
I
one recently. I was like, look at this one.
I also think like during the pandemic, because you had to like slow down in life, I started noticing
Yes.
flowers blooming and stuff. And I was like, yo,
Yes.
have these always been here? Is this seasonal? Because
Exactly.
I never had time or didn't pay attention.
And I wasn't
before.
walking in my neighborhood before.
Yeah.
Like I went to the gym to work out. I wasn't taking these like slow casual strolls. So yeah, I think that I definitely wanted to incorporate, some visual imagery around plant life in the book. And so hydrangeas were one of them. There's also jacarandas, which is like my favorite tree in Los Angeles because they're purple at the right time of year and just beautiful. And so I just thought it would be a really vivid image for the book. And it, turned into a great cover option as well, which was
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask how many iterations did you do, but it sounds like you were pretty sure that this was the look and feel you
Yeah.
wanted.
I mean, and it's funny because there's no guarantee as an author that you will have, you can give input on the cover, but the publishers, they're business people. They know what performs well, they know what the trends are, they know what people gravitate toward. And so when they asked if I had any thoughts, I put a deck together because again, I am a corporate person. So I had my little PowerPoint presentation of different ideas. And I said, this is just a suggestion. You all are the experts, but I just have this idea about this, really vivid close up of a dark hydrangea bush. And I was shocked when they sent several options to me, but they were all iterations on that idea, which was fantastic. So I was like, oh, okay, we've nailed it. I'm curious to see if that happens with the second book. I don't feel like I have as strong of a perspective on that cover, but I'll see what they come back with.
Yeah. Well, definitely excited. What advice do you have? You talked a little bit about your process being a little different for the first, having to make adjustments. What advice do you have for other aspiring writers and authors?
Yeah, I have two things. One I've said a lot, another is new or that's occurred to me more recently. The one that I've said a lot, but I think bears repeating, is that revision and feedback are gifts. So, it was my very first book that I
Amen.
wrote back in college or back right after college. One of the biggest problems with that book was that I wrote it in a vacuum. I didn't let anybody see it. I like wrote it until it was completed using air quotes. And I thought that it was perfect. And then I joined a writing group and I just expected to receive praise. And instead, they
Yes.
very lovingly, like it was a very great, kind, conscientious group. They all pointed out the same problems, big problems that would require me to completely rewrite the novel. And I did not think that that was a part, I didn't realize the importance of revision in writing fiction at the time. And so those are two kind of hard lessons that I needed to learn.
They were
Um,
haters. Is that what that felt like?
no,
No.
no, honestly, what it felt like
No.
was, when somebody says something that really hits you because you know it's true.
Yeah.
Mm,
So it wasn't mean feedback at all. They were pointing out things that as soon as they said it, I was like, oh no.
And you said the key
Oh
word
no,
too.
that's
You
true.
said lovingly. Like I think that
yeah.
you have to
Yes.
be open to feedback and constructive criticism. There's people who
Yes,
are just
exactly.
critics, and
There
then there
are
are people
haters
who
out
are
there.
trying to help you.
Exactly. So
So,
it's important to try to find the people whose feedback you respect and
yeah.
who will deliver the feedback in a constructive manner. So that's thing number one. And number two is if you want to be traditionally published, like by the big publishing houses, you want to see your book in bookstores, start educating yourself about the business of publishing long before it's time to start trying to get your book out into the world. And it's easy to do. There's so many podcasts out there. There's some really great Substacks out there that give this advice, but I think it really helps you to feel empowered so that when you have your conversations with your literary agents and potential editors, you know what questions to ask. You'll feel more empowered. And when it comes to, make negotiating contracts, you'll know what kinds of things to ask for. So again, as a person who's worked in corporate America for 20 years, I think it's really important that you educate yourself on the business side as well.
That's fantastic advice. I think especially for creatives,
Yeah,
often
This is
yes,
that's
so,
where the missing of the mark happens.
yes.
exactly.
Get taken
Very
advantage
true.
of. So, from the story perspective of We Don't Talk About Carol, what's the biggest lesson or message you're hoping that readers take away?
Yes. I mean, I think it's really the piece about you can't it can be very tempting to sweep difficult things under the rug and not deal with them, not address them, just assume that you're over it. But if there's something that's really, if you feel the need to tamp something down in that way, it probably means that you do need to take a closer look at it, maybe with the help of a therapist to
Hmm.
help you work it out. But that's really important. And, being able to have open conversations also with the people in our lives about things that are, difficult things, maybe even be experiencing with them is so important in terms of moving forward. You can't just skip ahead. You can't just skip ahead to, this beautiful future that you want for yourself without being able to kind of sit with what you might have experienced and to process those things.
But
So I think
everyone has
that's
to be on board. That's the problem.
yeah, and the thing is too, if the other people are not involved, you can also do a lot of important healing on your own,
Yeah.
because you can't
Yes.
also, you can try your best, to try to like open a dialogue with people, but they're not always going to be receptive to that, unfortunately. I've experienced that myself, but you know what? You can still heal. Again, with the help of therapy, I'm a big proponent of talk therapy.
Amen.
Amen.
Changed my
Amen.
life.
Absolutely. So I usually ask, what's your favorite book? But I'll ask it this way. What's a favorite book, TV show, or film you return to again and again, and why? I guess it's like, what's your comfort show, book, movie?
Let's see. As far as there are two things that came to mind. Recently, my comfort TV show has been Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix.
Hmm.
I don't know if either of you have watched this.
I have
No.
not. Shockingly, we have not.
We
Well,
usually
you're
go
in for a
through.
treat. You're in for a treat, okay?
Somebody feed
They're
Phil.
Somebody Feed Phil. There's several seasons on Netflix. I've like when I'm like in a sad mood or I just need a bit of comfort, an injection of comfort, I
I've
watch this
seen
show
this. I've
because
only seen
Phil.
the trailers. I haven't like watched the show.
So, like, first of all, like you get it's a food show and a travel show. So Phil Rosenthal's really he's just the most charming, genuine, like authentically good seeming person. And he travels to these wonderful destinations. His brother is like a producer, I believe, on the show, so which they like riff with each other quite a bit. So there's a cute little sibling dynamic going on. He involves his wife and his kids as well. They travel to different places. He, meets with chefs at different restaurants and has different people in the community, bring him to different locations to dine in those destinations. So it's a travel show, it's a food show. You also have these really beautiful moments of human connection. So that's a big one. And then I don't know, I watch Eat, Pray, Love almost anytime I'm on a really long flight. I think it's like, again, I love
Interesting.
travel. I find it really inspiring. And I really just like that sort of introspection and questioning whether you're on the right path in life
Yes.
and whether you can make big changes in your life if you there's something inspiring about that to me in
Yes.
Yeah.
that story as well.
Yeah.
So
And that
yeah,
one based on a true
just
story of an author, right? And a
yes,
writer.
Yes.
exactly,
Well,
exactly.
Yes.
there you go.
Yes.
Well, I think Wicked is going to be my go-to on all my long flights.
Ooh, that's a good choice. So
It's so
good.
good. It is
Even though I
so
told Delora I watched it
good.
when I came back from Italy and I cried. I was like, I cry every time at the end because her
Oh
voice just
yeah.
knocks me out.
It's so good.
It's so powerful. So
Yes.
good. I know. I was crying like a baby in the movie theater. It was
I
very
was
Yeah.
too.
embarrassing.
I was too. Ashley was sitting there right next to me. I was like, it's better than I thought. Like,
It was
just
Yeah.
because
phenomenal.
I saw the stage play, I knew the
Yes.
soundtrack inside and out. So
Yes.
I didn't know what to expect. And
Same.
boy, was I blown away. I wanted to live in Oz. Like, it was amazing.
Talk
I'm
about an
Amazing.
excellent
really
adaptation.
I'm really
Yes.
hoping for a double feature when the second one comes out. Like for those participating
Back to
theaters,
back.
anyone listening, go ahead and give me some hard times. I will come in for Wicked 1. Let's take a break. Let's refuel. Let's bathroom. Let's eat. Come back for Wicked Part 2 same
I,
day.
I did that for
Excellent
Hunger
idea.
Games. They did that for the Fire Notebook was broken up into two movies. I did that
Mm.
and they were forever. I loved it. I was in that whirlwind when that happened.
All right. Final question for us today. Kristen, you've already talked about you're working on a second book. What can you tell us? What's next in terms of your storytelling?
Yes. So yeah, it's so funny. I think my book came out, We Don't Talk About Carol came out June 3rd. My delivery date to my editor for the first draft of my second book was July 14th. So just like
Fast.
Wow.
very fast. Yeah, really fast. Hence me having to give myself writing goals as far as word count for the first time in my life. So I can't go into too much detail about the book just yet, the second book, but let's just say, so We Don't Talk About Carol was a suspense and a family drama. The new book is a suspense and a friendship drama because I think that, significant best friendships don't necessarily get the same treatment as other close relationships, especially like as adults. But those can often be some of the strongest and most meaningful relationships. And so, especially if that relationship starts to falter, that can be very difficult for the people involved. So that's sort of a light teaser about that book. But yeah, I'm currently waiting for edits from my editor, and then I will get into revision mode. But hopefully that will be out before you know it.
Well, I'm super excited to see what you bring next. To your point, friendship heartbreak is some of the biggest heartbreak in life, in my opinion. I've had to go through it a couple of times. It's never fun, never fun.
Not at all. Sometimes it's necessary.
Yes.
Sometimes it's necessary, but
just like with all relationships.
But they know where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah, that part. And they also know your most vulnerable parts. You know what I mean? Like, man, no one knows how to hurt you.
And it's also like just like you're walking through life with people, right? So there's a significant part of you that lives with that relationship, that lives with that person, that has those memories that are held together. And that sometimes is the biggest death of all. Is like we were walking through this life together, and now what am I supposed to do?
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And then you're constantly reminded of them.
Yes.
All the time.
Like when they're in your wedding pictures and they're like, oh, we don't talk like we used to.
Yes.
Oh, it hurts. Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I guess we'll have the tissues ready just in case for this one then.
You might. I've definitely made myself cry a few times while writing it. So, but I made myself cry with We Don't Talk About Carol too. And I scared myself a few times as well.
I just imagined
you were a vessel for the story.
Exactly. I was like, oh gosh. Yeah, exactly.
I just imagine you like Diane Keaton and Something's Gotta Give. Remember she was going through the heartbreaking scenes with Jack Nicholson and she's just typing away, bawling her eyes out.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was a little bit like that. But I think that's how you know that like you're really hitting some emotional core,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cry.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the time today, for the gift of this story and book. Like, obviously, we're big fans as well. So I hope we brought a little bit of that emotion that the other readers who give you great feedback bring you, because it really was a phenomenal experience to get to listen to and read We Don't Talk About Carol. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much for having me. Oh, and shout out to the narrator for the audiobook, Nicole Cash. Yes. She did it. She nailed it. So phenomenal.
Yes, she did.
Absolutely. Well,
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share it out with everybody that you know. We will be back. But in the meantime, as always, be blessed.
Bye.